Good morning and welcome to the show. This is K24 this morning. My name is Jeff Mote. Karibu sana. If you're joining us for the first time, we look at the big stories making headlines across our dailies and dig a bit deeper into certain conversations that need to be had. We also love when you contribute on the show. Our WhatsApp number at the bottom of the screen, as always. Alternatively, you can also get me on Twitter at I am Jeff Mote or at K24 TV. Let's look at the front pages of our dailies and see what's in store today. Start off with the front page of the PD. Which way, Ruto? The PD asks DP meets allies tomorrow as divisions emerge on how they should handle the recent ban on meetings. One group says they should disobey and protest on the streets, but the other side is calling for restraint. Let's not turn Kenya into an animal farm where all animals are equal, but some are more equal than others. This is a quote from the Deputy President. And of course, this has been seen to be exhibited this past weekend. And very many questions being asked on how he moves forward and what really this means, especially for his political future. It makes for the front page of the People Daily. Also on the front page of the PD, schools face COVID-19 hiccups as they open doors to learners. As you can see right there, protocols have been put in place as far as the Ministry of Health is concerned, from checking of temperature to washing of hands. We've seen certain schools just hosing down the students as they sanitize them to get in, and this really being the new normal as we look at that. And that story being on the front page of your People Daily this morning. Don't forget, you can get your People Daily as well straight to your phone. It's only 10 shillings. The number that you dial is star 550 star 4 hash. Once again, the number is star 550 star 4 hash. Dial that number, get yourself a copy of your People Daily straight to your phone. It's brought to you by the PD and Safaricom as well. So once again, star 550 star 4 hash. Dial it and get it straight to your phone. Convenience at the touch of a button. Let's look at the front page of the Daily Nation now. Lessons, a shocker for pupils and tutors. Longer hours in class, shorter holidays in bid to complete 5 terms by end of 2021. We had this conversation yesterday. Some educationists looking at it as a crash program to try and cram in as much as possible. And as the Daily Nation puts it, the first batch of pupils and students reported to school yesterday for the start of the second term in what is expected to be a rush to complete the year's syllabus and sit the national examinations from March 2021. Teachers have been challenged to be innovative in recovering the 7 months learners lost due to COVID-19. And innovative they'll have to be indeed. That's making the front page of your Daily Nation this morning. You can get the details of that therein. Looking at the front page of the Standard now, they're calling it the big gamble. Excitement and confusion as schools open. Exams start next week to test learners' preparedness. Low turnout in some areas amid struggle to meet social distance rules. That's something even the Ministry of Education had spoken about, it being hard in terms of managing to deal with this particular scenario of social distancing, especially where these classes are concerned of lower levels of primary school. You can find the story in your copy of your Standard therein. Also, in your Standard, 60 years of slogans, how to con Kenyans. The Standard says, from Uhuru na Kazi in the early 1960s to Bado Mapambano, Tano Tena, and now they're saying hustler. Kenya's political dustbin is overflowing with catchphrases that captured national imagination only to disappoint. You can find that on page 6 and 7 of your Standard this morning, the details of all of that therein. And for those who are money-minded in your enterprise, in your financial Standard, pull out of your Standard, the hidden money minters of Marikiti. It's the only part of the city that never goes to sleep. It's loud, it's brutal, but it's also where fortune favors the brave. Meet the men and women feeding the city. You can find that story in your copy of your financial Standard, your pull-out in today's Standard therein. Lesson 1 of Back to School, don't share. Teachers say it's difficult but necessary to introduce selfish behavior. Strange new world for students who have to unlearn virtues like sharing and generosity, not playing. It really is going to be different as they get back in school, and such is a new normal as they're talking about it as we move forward. Teachers say it's difficult but necessary to introduce quote-unquote selfish behavior. You can find that story in your copy of your Star therein. As we talk about that, also, there's a contested bill on the floor of the House pretty soon. MP split over proposed laws on Harambes. That's an issue that you can get the discussions on that as well in your copy of your Star. It's on page 2 therein. Of course, that's what you're looking at this morning as far as your dailies are concerned. But also right here on the show, we're talking about early campaigning, 2022 politics. Still a couple of months away from that, couple of years even. But really, where should we draw the line from when campaigns start? When do they stop? Is it an event that's ever continuous? We have that discussion right here in studio. We'd love it if you chime in on the conversation as well, even as we go through it. Welcome. This is K24 this morning. And welcome back. Let me get to my panel in studio, even as we jump into this particular discussion. In studio, we have public policy analyst Arnold Maliba. Good morning.
Morning, sir.
Karibu sana.
Asante.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Asante sana. We also have Joy Mdivo. She is the Executive Director, East Africa Center for Law and Justice. Good morning, Joy.
Good morning, Jeff. Good
Karibu
to see
sana.
you back.
Likewise, asante sana. We also have Justice Minor. He is now on Skype, joining the conversation via Skype from Bomet, I believe. Good morning, Justice.
Good morning.
Karibu sana.
Thank you very much.
Welcome to the show. Even as we start, before we jump into the rough and tumble of what is politics right now, quick going around the table. Yesterday was day one, and as you're seeing from these particular headlines, it's going to be a strange new time for our students going back to school when all along you're taught to share. I mean, all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy, but clearly these rules are out the window. What's your assessment of day one from what you saw and what you think this term will be as they get their footing? Let me start with Arnold.
I think yesterday was typical of what we expected. We had some places where everything was actually in place, and then there are other schools that didn't even have things in place. There are places where there were no masks, no sanitizers, nothing in place. But in other schools we saw, of course, systems running quite effectively, and that is what you would expect on day one of a big operation like what we were trying to experiment with yesterday. What I do not understand is that how are we going to bring in other students, especially when you are spreading just 3 classes into the whole into the whole school. Like one class in a certain school had occupied about 6 normal classes. So then what happens to the others? Even as we test and work around that, I think we will have to find practical. We need to move away from the idealistic thinking about addressing this thing and just get practical.
Okay, Joy, what's your assessment of day one from where it stands right now? And also, with what you're seeing as far as what the students are going back to, no play, longer hours in class. Really, even for the best of us who had all of these facilities, school wasn't that interesting. Now, longer hours in class, no play. How do the students survive an entire term, 3 terms of that particular way of learning?
Last week I pointed out that I would love for the schools to reopen, but I wish that they would reopen without any of the restrictions. That the only restrictions we would have are for children with comorbidities or children in special schools because of their fragile health. But in the converse, that the public would be educated on if your household has got school-going children and you have the elderly, people with comorbidities, what protocols should you employ in your home? So that the control, therefore, is in the home rather than trying to impose these directions in school. Why? Because we know that children, at best, are super spreaders. They themselves hold up pretty well even if they're infected with COVID. That said, with the length of time they've been away from school, with the amount of pressure that they have before they face the exams, is when I posited the question last time. I said, I want our children to go back to school. But if they're going back to school that is such a heavy burden, are we really doing them any favors? Or is the point to just do exams? If the point is just to do exams, then they should have told us, tutor your children, the exam will be set tarehe fulani, we'll send it along to you. There's no need to have children who've already suffered the psychological trauma of thinking that they're going to lose a whole school year to now go back to school and realize it's death by school. Because if you're going to have longer hours, they're going to go to study until the 23rd of December, break for 1 week, come back for another. It's a lot for them to take. And that's why I agree with Arnold. A little bit more thinking ought to have gone into this process and something more nuanced. Because I said earlier, we have got millions of school-going children, but the people we have seen being affected, the worst affected by COVID, we know are a certain demographic. We have similar diseases, for example, like TB in our midst. We have protocol of what you do when somebody in your household has TB. Why do we not break it down to that level rather than curtailing all these school children? Because like Arnold has correctly pointed out, now you're dealing with candidates, yes, because you want them to do an exam, yes, you want them to tick a box. Okay, what about the rest of the children, the rest of the learners? What about those who are yet to get into the system? What about university education? Who's going to advance? So I wish the discussion was you could see some sense into it. And unfortunately, let me just finish this. Yesterday, I was watching one of the international media houses, and I was listening to a minister of education in one of the countries in Europe talking about how the exams are going to be done in May, others are going to be done in June, others. As in, you can see people are planning ahead. And these are guys who are facing a second wave. Yeah, we are with just our one wave, but we are failing to just put one foot in front of the other. We need a rethink. But I'm glad the children are back in school. I hope this, they said they're looking at the next 14 days. After that 14 days, let us see some thinking getting into the process.
Okay. Justice, I'll have you on this before we move on to our topic of the day right now. We've seen an increase in numbers of infections now in a couple of counties. That was also a key point of concern for you personally, Justice. As children go back to school, do you think this is really what is keeping all parents up at night and probably even having some of them reluctant to send their children back to school?
Yes. I think generally and typically as a country, we are gambling with this. We do not seem to have a clear plan on how to, carry out a proper rollout of the reopening of our schools. Definitely, it has got all the symptoms and the features of pata poter. Clearly, our schools, the parents, the students, the pupils, the management, nobody clearly is ready for this. And of course, these are also the possible carriers of, COVID-19 needs this movement. It is carried, the transmission is the movement of the human beings. So I do not believe that we are even ready as a country for the possible, flare out of the numbers again as a result of this reopening of schools. So therefore, I think the parents going to bed, and as a parent myself, and this movement of children, when they come back home, you never know whether they have suddenly become carriers. You're not so sure. I mean, you've seen in some schools, some of the students do not have, most of their schools, of course, do not have running water, which is very critical in terms of prevention against transmissions of COVID-19. They may not have sufficient, in public schools, in villages, even the parents to afford masks is a big challenge. They may afford a mask for 2 or 3 days. The third day, I'm very sure it will be, life returning to normal in schools. Okay. The students and children will be maskless. There will be no running water. And therefore, the very risk and the very high risk of infection going up, to me, is real, and that needs to be addressed. Is even more urgent than the fact of having children going back to school. Okay.
I want us to switch gears now and move on to what we're discussing today. It's all about matters politics, and it seems like that really is the drum that's beating ever louder as far as Kenya's political landscape is concerned. Let's start from there. We also have a question of the day that we'll be posing to you. Let's have that up on screen even as we start. How can political leaders be more accountable to those who elected them? Once again, how can political leaders be more accountable to those who elected them? That's you and me. We'd love to get your feedback on this. You can send your message, your thoughts, your feedback on the WhatsApp number at the bottom of the screen. You can also get me on Twitter at @IamJeffMotem and at K24 TV. Let's get right to it, gentlemen, lady, from page of the PD. Which way Ruto, they ask, and there's a quote from DP Ruto therein. Let's not turn Kenya into an animal farm where all animals are equal, but some animals are more equal than others. Arnold, when you try and trace where the rain started beating this relationship of the DP and the president, most members in the party will say that the problem is that he started campaigning too early. And that's what the problem was. He was too impatient. He didn't wait to be handed the baton. But in Kenyan politics, going for development tours and campaigning, there's a very gray line right in there. You really don't know which is which. How do you distinguish these two activities? Because he said he was going around launching projects. They said he was going to campaign. How do you put a distinction between these two activities?
Well, I find it very difficult to sometimes understand the kind of languages, or rather the language we use in defining some of these concepts, because in this country we have been politicking constantly since the year 2002, when we realized that it was easy to seize power from sitting president or something like that. That is why, like I mentioned last Tuesday, is that we had a number of campaigns running, that in 2002 we win the elections, then there is war in NAC at that particular time. LDP and their guys are kicked out. Then there is a referendum in 2005. The sitting government loses. The results of 2005 then set us as a country against each other for 2007, 2008 post-election violence. After that, of course, then we have got a Nusumukate arrangement where we have got a prime minister who is constantly trying to campaign. By the way, the prime minister did constantly trying to look like he was in control and was also campaigning for the future. In 2010, then we moved to a referendum, which then throws us into another campaign into 2012, 2013, one of the longest active campaign seasons we've had. So we come in and then Jubilee acts like they have got, in fact, the president himself was continuously campaigning in his first season, his first term. So it's not true that the rain started beating Jubilee when the deputy president started early campaigns. After all, everybody, including the president today, is actually campaigning. He is campaigning for somebody else. He is campaigning for his friends. He is setting up systems and trying to talk about post-2022. If you're trying to organize post-2022 Kenya, what are you doing? You are campaigning. He is selling us legacies and good things that should actually come, will actually form the future. So he's also campaigning. For what? We don't know, whether it's the PM or anything else. Truth is that I think the deputy president expected that there will be something like this. So he hit the road running with a little bit of, and by the way, his guys were cheering him when he gave us all those poetic, when he did poetry with us, telling us in 6 months, Serikali Metenga and these things. He literally was Jubilee's bulldozer. He was the tip of the spear when it came to penetrating the hearts of people, when it came to going to places, even when it came to dismissing the opposition. He was that particular tool that was deployed. But somehow, when then things have changed, they have won. Of course, if I were the president, I would actually have picked with him issues on how he was called towards the handshake. All of us remember that moving into the handshake, as a country, we were in limbo. Even the campaigning we were talking about wasn't happening during that particular time because there was tension every single day. There's the people's president, there's Uhuru Park, there is a lot of business can't move, the economy can't open up. So little bit, of course, logic was that we expected him to probably, after asking questions if he had issues in the closet, he then should actually have found ways of taking control of this handshake and made it his own. But of course, he probably might have worked out the numbers and realized that even if he took control of it, it could cause problems to him. So the rain in Jubilee did not start beating them because of the deputy president starting campaigning. If anything, the president is campaigning himself. So everybody in Jubilee is cheating.
Let me get joined on this one as well, because even as you look at this particular scenario and how it's playing out, we had a situation, and this was actually brought to the fore last week when we had a couple of panels right here when the National Security Advisory Council came out, gave measures on how people will associate, the path that you need to take in terms of protocols, getting clearance from OCSs and all of this. But you go into that first weekend, and those protocols seemed awfully skewed to one side, and that's one thing very many Kenyans were looking at. What's your assessment on that moving forward? Because that's what we're reading in between the lines when the DP says that there are some animals more equal than others, and that should stop.
I think I agree with Arnold that everybody in this particular melee has a hand to play and has played their hand very well. And so there's no one person who can point and say others have done early campaigns, others have not, because we've been campaigning for one thing or another. It's been BBI, or it's been Ruto will never be president, or it's been the takeovers in the houses, or it's been the takeover in Jubilee. There's been something that we've been agitating towards in the last 2 years. So there's no one who can say, by the way, the rest of us have just been busy with development while others have been politicking. No, even the nature of the developments have taken on a political spin. And so it's one of those things where, as Kenyans, we're all wondering, what are you talking about when you talk about early campaigns? Because, quite frankly, that's been Kenya. You end one election, you start campaigning the next day for the next election. It's been ridiculous like that all along. But I think that where the trigger was pulled is when we saw deliberate public utterances talking specifically about how the DP will not be allowed to run in 2022 by whatever means, for whatever reason. I think that is what sort of set him off. He was like, oh, so you mean that's the plan, that's a big idea. And then steps being taken to make that look like it is going to be the full hog. Because in the beginning, you remember he used to tell us, no, the president and I are fine, the party is good, we are putting ourselves together. But eventually, I think it dawned on him, these guys may be serious, that come 2022, there's no Jubilee for me to run on. There's no goodwill for me to run on this Jubilee. And so we realized in the last about 2-3 weeks, he just flipped a switch and said that, you know what? Yeah, kama mbaya mbaya, kufa gari kufa dereva. So we have all changiad in this early election crisis. But where we are, like you're saying, is that in trying to contain the situation and trying to bring back some sanity, again, there have been very, how do I call them own goals, where you want to accomplish one thing, but you end up doing the other. So, for example, you disperse the Kisii meetings, but then you see CS Matiang'i going around on top of his Prado campaigning. As in, what is that? It flies in the face of logic. You say no church can have a fundraiser because of COVID, and then we see the former Prime Minister and a delegation of people from Central having a fundraiser for a church on the same day that you have told another church. So those things are the ones that now make Kenyans wonder, okay, fine. The famous quote of what is good for the goose is good for the duck. We've gotten to a place where we need to just have one set of rules, because Kenyans agree there's need for rules. But if the rules are only being followed on one side, guess what? The other side starts feeling victimized. One of two things would happen. Either they will start just, defying, but on the other hand, they could also get into a place where now they play victim, and it becomes now a source of sympathy votes. But over and above that, we must remember that these are constitutional safeguards that have been put in place. These are not favors that the political class is doing for us. These are not favors that the National Security Committee is doing for us. This is not something that even the police is giving us. The Constitution talks about the police being informed that we will be in a certain place so that they can come and offer security. It's not for the OCS to tell you can go ahead or you cannot go ahead. That's ridiculousness. And I think our LSK president is going to court on that. And he should do, because as far as I'm concerned, we are rolling back some of these constitutional gains for political expediency. And it's a dangerous trend.
Justice, I'll have you in on this. We have a couple of minutes before we get to break. When you talk about the National Security Advisory Committee, that's as high as it goes when it comes to security issues in the country. And as was pointed out last week on the show, if you have that topmost organ being put in place and putting measures to curtail one man, are we saying, in effect, that this man is that powerful politically and that's why we need to get this organ in?
But first, I think the fact that Uhuru Kenyatta is using police, is it a demonstration of strength or an indication of weakness? If Uhuru's government today need an OCS to help him, does it indicate he is strong, or in a nutshell, it demonstrates some weakness in the part of the Mandarin in Harambee House? To me, it is the opposite. Once the government is using a lot of, does Uhuru need tear gas? Does Uhuru need the bullet for him to demonstrate he's the president? In fact, I think the Uhuru must begin to use the power of persuasion, the power of reasoning, more than the power of the tear gas and the gun, even at the sanctums of the churches. So, in my opinion, and you know, the power of the police lies in the neutrality of the police. The moment the police begin to be invited to play partisan politics, they loses the authority. Clearly, the authority of the police lies squarely because of his non-partisan manner in which the police service carries out its mandate. The moment they are invited to speak the language of Atwoli, the moment they are invited to speak a similar language like Murade, the moment even the Inspector General himself speaks like he's been given some instructions by Murade, like you saw his tweet yesterday, and that if thugs today were to threaten to invade a bank, then that bank will be ordered to be closed, as opposed to the police providing security for the operations of the bank, then you realize that the thugs have carried the day. So in my opinion, the moment you see the police playing partisan politics, then you're inviting chaos as a country, because the citizens respect the police because they know the police are going to be neutral. The moment they begin to feel policemen are not neutral, are not impartial, Chef, of course, you 100%, you know, we are going the road that we've been there before, and a very slippery road. So for a country, the stability of this nation depends entirely and you know, the government has got the monopoly of violence. Police has got the monopoly of violence. And that monopoly of violence must be exercised cautiously, discreetly, and more importantly, impartially. Once that monopoly of violence that has been bestowed and that is exercised by police is being exercised partially, then of course you are inviting anarchy and chaos in the country.
Okay, that's actually going to lead us to our first break right here on the show. Even as we speak about this particular issue, we're talking about 2022 politics, also looking at the early campaigns that are taking place. From the panel, it seems like it's not early campaigns, it's just that they never stopped. You know, they got one election done, started campaigns on the other. Seems like a cyclical event right there. You can also get me on Twitter at I am Jeff Morte. I have Papakila Saimo coming in saying the problem is that our leaders are always there only for themselves, and that's why they'll never stop campaigning as long as they get their salaries and allowances, they're fine. Harold Andrew Kenyanjui, when trust stumbles, things change, and we don't trust the politicians. That's why we are where we are. Excelsior, politicians will do everything anytime except doing what they were elected to do. Okay, hashtag K24 this morning. Keep those tweets coming in. You can get me at I am Jeff Morte or at K24 TV. Don't forget, you can get yourself a copy of your People Daily straight to your phone. It's only 10 shillings, so you don't need to leave your office if you're watching this. You don't need to leave the house. All you need to do is just dial the number *550 *4#. Once again, the number is *550 *4#, and you'll get yourself a copy of your People Daily straight to your phone. It's brought to you by the PD and Safaricom. Short break, back with more. This is K24 This Morning.